Good morning, everyone. Good morning, welcome to this morning's formal meeting of the Community Safety Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Alan Woodruff, I'm the chairman of the committee. On my right is my vice chairman, Councillor Neil Carey, and on my left is our Democratic Services Officer, Joseph Barker. We also have present in the chamber our Scrutiny Officer, Hannah Colclough. I would like to begin with the standard health and safety announcements. There's no fire drill planned this morning, so in the event of the alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through reception into the front car park, where we will await further instructions. The meeting is being streamed live via the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online after the meeting and can be reported by the media. With this in mind, I would like to welcome members of the public and press watching our meeting today. Can I remind everyone to ensure mobiles, laptops, tablets are on silent for the duration of the meeting, and the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. If you wish to speak, can you please raise your hand and we will make a note. We will now move on to the formal agenda. So item 1 is apologies for absence. Joseph, do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Billy Robinson will replaced by Councillor Bean for this meeting only.
Brilliant, thank you. Item 2 is declarations of members' interests. Do any members wish to declare any interests? Nope. Excellent, thank you. Item 3 is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting of the Community Safety Scrutiny Committee held on the 13th of January 2025, the correct record. The minutes are found on pages 5 to 14 of the agenda pack. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Bridgewood, and a seconder. Councillor Bamford. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Those minutes are agreed as a correct record. Item 4, announcements by the Chair and Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. I've just got a reminder that we have a scheduled visit to the LFR Waddington Training Centre on Friday the 20th of March 2026 from 9:30 till 1. It is asked that we will arrive promptly on time for a 9:30 start. Access and parking information was sent to all members via email last Wednesday. If you have any further questions about this information or anything in relation to the visit, please contact Joseph Barker, our DSO, or Hannah Colclough, our Scrutiny Officer. Yes, Councillor Christopher.
I'd just like to give my apologies. It's my wedding anniversary that day, and my wife and I have other plans, so that will not be on the agenda for me, or I might end up not being married anymore. So, thank you.
It makes an excellent venue for dates and anything else. So, do we have any executive councillor announcements?
No announcement from my end, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And any announcements from any senior officers? Right. Excellent. Thank you very much. Moving on to the main items of business. So, item 5 is the Trading Standards Fair Trading Activity for 24 to 25. This report is on pages 15 to 28 and provides an annual overview of trading standards activity relating to fair trading. Members of the committee are invited to review the contents of the report and seek assurance on the delivery of fair trading work undertaken by Trading Standards. The report is going to be presented by Mark Hill, the Head of Trading Standards. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Yes, so this report is into the fair trading activity carried out by the fair trading team. With me today is Dan Brown, who is the lead officer in that team and the expert for any questions relating to the projects that appear in the report. I'd like to thank Dan as well, because he drafted up the report itself, and I just added some finishing touches to it, so the report is mostly Dan's work there. So onto the report itself, as you said, it does provide an overview of the work undertaken by Dan's team between April 24 and December 25. It's a little bit longer in duration, but this is the first time we've brought a fair trading report to Scrutiny, and it covers the period from when the work would have last been covered, when we had a trading standards overall business report that was presented to Scrutiny. So the fair trading team comprises of 3.6 full-time equivalent qualified officers who are supported by 2.8 officers who are currently undergoing training and working towards completing their trading standards professional apprenticeship. They obviously play an increasingly important role in building resilience for the team and the service as a whole. The team's work continues to prioritise protection of vulnerable residents, tackling road trading, supporting legitimate businesses and contributing to a fair and safe trading environment across Lincolnshire. During this period, the service received almost 8,000 fair trading related complaints, with the highest volume being relating to used cars, pricing, doorstep crime, intellectual property and lettings. These complaints inform risk-based decision-making and the allocation of enforcement resources. Doorstep crime investigations remain complex and can be resource-intensive. 4 major investigations are ongoing, with recent successful prosecutions, including a Stamford trader who was jailed for fraud, totaling just over £52,000, and a Skegness trader convicted for taking deposits from 8 victims and failing to complete work. The other fraud-related cases resulted in 49 months of suspended sentences, 580 hours of unpaid work, and nearly £13,500 in compensation for the victims of those crimes. For used cars, we've taken part in Operation Oxbow. This is a regional initiative that's funded by National Trading Standards and targets the most complained about car dealers in the county. Initial audits identified 14 non-compliances across 2 premises. Complaints have since reduced at both of those locations. Further audits are funded through an additional £7,000 of National Trading Standards funding. Final outcomes are expected in mid-2026. We'll report on that next time we bring this paper. For intellectual property, we've done some large-scale operations that have led to the seizure of nearly 18,000 counterfeit items across this period. Recent prosecutions include a Skegness couple convicted for repeatedly selling counterfeit and unsafe goods. A business director was sentenced for selling over 5,500 counterfeit homeware and unsafe electrical products. Confiscation proceedings are ongoing, and a contested hearing is listed for that for June this year. Lettings compliance is a relatively new addition to our area. 30 agents were audited for compliance with letting legislation, and significant non-compliance was found, particularly in the areas of fee transparency and scheme memberships, providing material information. 58% of agents took corrective action following intervention. Two agents referred to the National Trading Standards, estate agents and letting agency team, with a national team who take enforcement action. We just referred a couple of the more resistant traders over to them for intervention. In terms of special projects, Operation Flamingo inspected jewellers and pawnbrokers. One of the areas that we cover is hallmarking. Non-compliance identified 3 businesses which were misdescribing the way that gold and diamond products were described. A pricing compliance project reviewed 29 rural convenience stores, and again we issued some advice and warnings to improve fairness for consumers facing cost of living pressures. For business support and partnerships, the team delivered 45 visits on the East Coast regarding intellectual property compliance. 4 primary authority partnerships are currently supported by the fair trading team, and under those they purchased some time to get bespoke advice from officers that's tailored to their business. We also support 22 markets that are signed up to the Real Deal scheme to help them combat unsafe and counterfeit goods being sold at their locations. We launched Buy with Confidence in 2024. It's taking off, but very slowly. We signed up some additional members, and we currently have 4. We'd like to see that grow, and we're working with comms on promoting that further, because it is a good scheme where people who are looking for tradesmen can contact somebody that they know has been vetted by trading standards. Challenges that we face currently, obviously capacity. It does limit the number of the investigations that the team can pursue at any one time. And we have got some court delays. I think we've about got rid of all of the COVID-related backlog that we had waiting to go through courts, but we are seeing trials, particularly trials up at the Crown Court, being delayed. We had one that has been scheduled for 2027 at the last hearing, which was at the end of 2025. So that does cause us some resource pressures in relation to keeping witnesses informed of the current position, just monitoring them, making sure that there are no changes that require us to perhaps take additional measures, such as getting video statements, that type of thing. Particularly with doorstep crime, some of the victims can be quite elderly or infirm, and the longer these delays knock on, we just have a higher chance that they may suffer additional complications that require us to take further steps. And we obviously, I've mentioned we've got apprentices in the team, and whilst this is essential in terms of keeping the service resilient, it is time intensive for senior officers to assist with that training and mentoring. One of the other issues, obviously, around being an intelligence-led service is also underreporting in some areas. So the lettings figures are quite low. Hallmarking definitely is something that the public don't know too much about, and we get very few complaints about. So we do undertake these surveys to test the marketplace. So in conclusion, despite limited resources, the team continues to deliver strong enforcement outcomes and support local businesses. It safeguards vulnerable residents. Intelligence-led operations and strengthened partnerships have improved compliance and helped disrupt criminal activity across the county. However, sustained resource pressures continue to impact the team's ability to undertake more proactive work. Thank you. I'm able to take any questions.
Many thanks, Mark. Now we'll invite members of the committee to speak on the report. Councillor Kendrick.
So thank you, Chairman. I'm fairly new to this committee. This is only my second meeting, so forgive me if I ask questions which everyone will know the answer to. The first one is on page 16 of the report under health and well-being. I was just wondering, do you have liaison with EHOs at district councils? Is there something that there's a crossover there? And my second question, I'm being greedy this morning, Mr. Chairman. My second question is with regard to the Buy with Confidence scheme. I was just wondering if there's anything that members of the council can do to support it in terms of publicising it within our localities. Because often, you see on Facebook, local Facebook groups, can you recommend a good plumber or whatever? I'm just wondering if there's something that if we were given the information, we could push that out within our own communities. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, in terms of environmental health, yes, we do have fairly regular contact with them. Not so much in relation to the fair trading work, but certainly food and some of the feed work. We have quite a lot of contact with them. In terms of Buy with Confidence and promoting it, it is a little bit chicken and egg where we are at the moment. We would love to push consumers that way because that generates interest amongst businesses. But if we push consumers at the moment, there aren't enough businesses. So they go onto the website and see that, you know, they might have to get somebody from Nottinghamshire or Leicestershire to come in to do the work, which is fine if you're at the edges of the county. But if you're out on the east coast, that's a little bit more tricky. So really it's promoting it to the businesses, which we are keen to do at the moment. Ideally, it would be fantastic to just dedicate somebody to do this work and almost as a project, but we're just not in that position at the moment. And unfortunately, the fees and admin costs aren't sufficient to make it a sort of self-supporting project in and of itself. So we do continue to push it. One of the things we are intending to do is perhaps look at where we've got doorstep crime type complaints, what those complaints are relating to, and then do some work to focus on those particular areas of business. So if it's roofing in one area, then we'll get in touch with roofers who are operating in that area and try and get a few signed up. So that's how we're hoping to build it going forward. But if you can pass the word on it to any businesses at all, that you're either contracting with yourself or that you know, that's the best that you can do for us at the moment.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned about the apprenticeships and the pressure it puts on the officers doing the training. How long is the training period? And at the end of it, do they get taken on? Is there a guarantee that they will be taken on in Lincolnshire? Or are you just training them up to then move to other counties and you've done all the work? And is it apprenticeship, is once they're taken on, is it a rolling programme for the future? Thank you. Right.
So we don't take them on as apprentices. We take them on as trading standards officers at an entry level. So they are our employees. The apprenticeship is a means to achieving the professional qualification. It's a fairly recent introduction. It's been running about 2.5 years, coming upon 3 years now. And it gives quite a lot of exemption from the old professional qualification run by the Chartered Trading Standards Institute. It takes roughly the same time as following the Chartered Institute's qualification, and it's around 3.5 to 4 years to fully qualify. So they are retained mostly. We've sort of budgeted reserves over the last few years to keep one in reserve, so if anybody leaves, we've got somebody to slot into the space. But it's not a rolling programme per se. As long as we are sort of managing the budget and we're not spending all of that reserve, we can sort of keep bringing somebody in. So it is a rolling programme. We do retain them, but they are our officers.
Councillor Bamford.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mark. It's an excellent report, very comprehensive. My question is, in terms of hotspots or repeat offenders, is there any proactive work with other agencies like the police to identify those that may be a little bit more organised as opposed to just opportunists? And what are we proactively doing to try and target and reduce the number of those more organised enterprises? Thank you.
Okay, so as I said, we are intelligence led. So we do spend quite a lot of time looking at our intelligence, but our intelligence team do also have access to police systems as well under an arrangement that was introduced a few years ago. We've got some police laptops, so we can look at niche and to see what if there's anything additional that they've got in terms of particular individuals that we might be interested in. So we do that monitoring. We do try and target the people who are generating the complaints. And once we've visited or advised or undertaken some sort of enforcement action, the Intel team do monitor from that going forward. Obviously, if things improve, that's great. But if they don't, then we can look to escalate the level of intervention. So if we've provided advice initially, then we might be looking at, depending on the nature of the offence, do we have to investigate formally under criminal sanctions? Are there civil sanctions that we can take? Can we issue penalty notices, that type of thing? So there is a scale of actions that we can take, that we can escalate as we need to.
May I just come back just briefly, Chair? So yeah, so I understand that. Just going back to my original question, and I know you may not have the figures in front of you, but ballpark, how much of this is opportunist and how much is actually organised more behind the scenes?
It's a bit of a mix. There are people, I would say the majority of the complaints that we get are due to a lack of understanding. Businesses set up, they don't always know where to come for advice, and they get going. That generates a complaint, and at that point that's when we become aware, and we can provide some sort of intervention at that point. But that said, there are career criminals as well, particularly around doorstep crime, particularly around counterfeiting, that type of thing. And some of it is linked to organised crime, particularly around counterfeiting, illicit tobacco, that type of thing. So I think it depends on the sector that you're looking at. It's hard to put a figure on it because, again, due to under-reporting, people don't always know that they've actually experienced an issue. Not everybody is aware that a trader that's come to their home should have provided them with cancellation rights. Now, that may have been done by the trader out of ignorance, or it may have been deliberately done to limit the consumer's access to their statutory rights. So it's difficult to put a sort of split percentage on it, I would say.
Thank you. Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you for the report. It's always very interesting. Could I just ask two quick questions, please? I notice on page 18 you're talking about traders taking deposits and taking money and then pushing off and not doing the work. Is there any work being done, for instance, to educate people not to pay before they receive the goods? So, it's very difficult for small traders as well, because sometimes they don't have money to buy stuff, so it's a balance, isn't it? And I don't know what you do in that situation. Maybe you could give me some ideas there, but generally, I certainly don't pay until the work is done. And I wonder if we can help people to sort of take that stance. So that would be my first question. Do you want to?
Yep. In an ideal world, yes, that's where we'd like consumers to be. Don't pay until the work has been completed. The issues that we've had is it's more to do with taking deposits for materials or to secure a start date for the work, and that's where people have tended to come undone. And let's say that people have paid up front for whatever fencing material or building material, and then the person has disappeared. And when we've made checks and inquiries, they've not ordered anything from any of the local builders merchants. They've just taken the money and scarpered. And it is a repeating offence. It's not a single incident. It's been several incidents. Sometimes that is masked as, I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul, as it were. I'm taking these deposits to actually finish off the job that I took 3 weeks ago when we actually get around to interviewing people. But it's not a viable business model, and eventually you're just taking deposits from everybody and not doing anything. So yes, in terms of advice, we do push advice out, and there's lots of advice online regarding accessing traders, particularly from people like Which. And Citizens Advice. There's some good advice out there on what to do if you want to employ a tradesman. But as you say, there are some small, very small traders who do live hand to mouth, and they may ask for that deposit, but ideally you want to be in a position where you're trading with somebody who just wants settling up after the work is done, and that would be my advice.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, one of the things I do, a simple thing, is when I have all these things, and recently doors and windows and things like that, is I pay the builder's merchant myself. I get the list, or even go with the builder to the merchant, pay it, and get it delivered so it doesn't touch the builder. That cuts the third party out altogether, and that's an easy thing to do, actually. It's no harder than paying the builder and the builder paying it on, so maybe paying the merchants directly would help. But the other thing I notice in here is very interesting, actually. You've achieved some successful prosecutions, and somebody was given a sentence which contained in part having to do 300 hours of unpaid work. Now, in the past, I've heard that quite often it's difficult to police that if they don't turn up, and when they do turn up, sometimes there isn't any work to give them in any case. So how do we actually see that those 300 hours would be done and would be actually a proper sentence? Thank you.
It's not something that that we monitor ourselves. It's a court issued penalty, and there'll be a court order for that, and the court and the service that are overseeing the unpaid work. If people don't turn up, they can get it back before the courts for either additional or alternative sanctions.
Thank you. Councillor Christopher.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report as well, Mark. I mean, I did email you last week, and thank you for coming back to me so quickly with a response on that. Just around what that email was regarding, really. I mean, I'm really looking at the resourcing elements, or that's what I sort of was drawn into. It says that you've got 3.6 full-time employees on a pro rata sort of basis, and I've sort of looked into that, and based on the staffing that you've got at the moment, and the availability in the very best possible circumstances without anyone being off sick and not doing any kind of additional training or anything like that, we're looking at 9.7 cases per day per employee. And of course I appreciate that some of them will be quite quick, sort of give advice and whatever else, but I'd be interested to know what the proportions are as to, you know, what percentage of these are actually out of that 8,000 total cases are just sort of actually we can just give a bit of advice or point them to another stakeholder. And how many are going a lot further. And then with regards to the new way of doing the policing around this and the substantial changes that we're getting to community policing as well, I'm deeply concerned that from what I'm seeing here that essentially we're not going to have that enforcement support, and it looks like the police are not going to have officers available to support our officers and keep them safe when they're doing enforcement activities. That's a really serious problem. So I suppose my question is, do you really feel like you've got enough staff to do this safely? Would it be better to be putting more money in it? And also, is that putting residents at risk? Because of course, if your team isn't resourced effectively, then that means our public are ultimately being put at risk. So yeah, thank you.
Right. Okay, Mark. Yeah, so in terms of the breakdown, I can't say off the top of my head, but I can get the figures and I can get those shared, so we can tell you. A lot of the complaints that come in because of our triage system, if it's relatively minor, we just note it for intel. It's the more serious ones that we actually pick up and run with. What we do with those that we close is we keep those under regular review. So nothing goes to waste, as it were. So if we have a situation where there's a minor pricing infringement shop, We might not go out first time, but if it suddenly appears on our internal document for having a regular issue with pricing, that's when we'll send somebody out to deal with it. So it may not be picked up immediately, but it's always there for consideration. But we'll get those figures over to you. In terms of the policing, I think Martin wants to come in on that.
Yes, I think you're right in terms of the policing element, and there's been a well-trodden narrative around kind of policing funding and policing resources and strapped, and certainly the Chief Constable's been, and the PCC have both been very vocal where the government have responded. So the government have put more money into Lincolnshire Police this year, not only in the baseline, so I think their 25-26 funding was something like £95 million roughly. The baseline then got uplifted this year in the pay settlement to something like £102 million, and they've been given and awarded a further £12 million on top of that to fill some of the resourcing gaps that they've been talking about, and that's a commitment for the next 3 years. So what we've got now is a short-term element where policing didn't recruit last year has caused the gap, which is what Lincolnshire Police are currently looking to resource. So they have remodeled some of their services, remodeled some of their resources to target and secure safety in the high risk, high harm areas. So that kind of having people to respond to activities that are happening now, so the response function. The crime investigation department, ensuring we've got sufficient, or Lincolnshire Police have got sufficient staff to respond to crime investigations, and then also sufficient staff to respond to protecting vulnerable people, so very much the child abuse, adult abuse, sexual offences type area. And they have moved people away from licensing. So for example, our kind of joint activity where there is licensing required both from a policing perspective and a trading standards perspective, that will have an impact. Thankfully for now that's a short-term impact, but the majority of our trading standards cases are dealt with in terms of pre-planned, pre-known, pre-organised, of which policing can sort of, what if they know about it, they can plan it into their duty. So actually we're hoping this is only a sort of a 6 to 12 month gap that Lincolnshire Police have got with the support of their funding. So the impact could have been far worse if we'd have seen it go on past the 6 to 12 months because there wasn't going to be an additional funding. But now there has been, and there's been that commitment from government to boost the baseline budget by a further 12 million each year, has enabled those kind of resources to be planned into next year to ensure that those gaps are refilled. So because our operations are mainly pre-planned, pre-thought out, pre-agreed kind of with policing, that we will generally get the resource in terms of the high risk, high harm elements to ensure that our safety of staff, and actually there's a collaborative approach to it. So whilst the licensing department has been reduced, it's not been stopped. So none of the activity where the chief has moved resources has stopped the activity in that area, it's just reduced it. So there were 4 licensing officers, there's now 2, so it does put a strain on them, but ultimately they're still there and available, and if we're well planned, well thought out, we can get those resources to support us.
Sorry, can I just come back briefly on that? So I work really closely with my community policing team in my area. They're wonderful. They do an incredible job. I mean, it's quite worrying that the way that these changes are coming through, actually on a community policing basis, we're losing quite a lot of our PCSOs. They're being sort of moved around. I'm sure it's only like 2 officers for community in the entire city of Lincoln, which is what they're sort of moving towards, and then one PCSO. It's bizarre with that, hundreds of 100,000 people to have such a small community team. And of course, they gather the intelligence sometimes that your teams will use. I think most of us here have maybe been to the Road Safety Partnership by now, or whatever else, where you've got this multi-agency approach and whatever else. And I think it's a real shame that actually we've got 3.6 officers that are under-resourced, essentially. They're not able to get through all of that work in a way that I'm sure they'd love to. And I just wonder whether there's an opportunity to maybe at some point as a council look at how we can maybe look at a similar scheme maybe, or has there been any work done in the past around that, about having a multi-agency approach to this so that we can really get on top of it? Because ultimately, I worked in an industry where we were going into people's homes to sell them products, and I had a very stringent approach on the company I worked for were wonderful. They were really, really strict on that. But I'm very aware from working in that industry for 10 years that there are a lot of people who would take advantage of residents, but also we've got the issue with the vape shops and all the other things as well. All of this falls in, and actually we're dealing with criminal gangs in that instance. These are, in some cases, very violent people, so it's deeply concerning for me that the police might not turn up. And of course, when they are stripped back on their own resourcing, if they do have an urgent case, and we've spent weeks building up to go and do an operation or something like that, and at the last minute, are there occasions where the police go, actually, we haven't got the resource today, we can't do that, and all of that work from our officers, which is already under pressure, is then wasted to some extent. And it just feels like actually we could do with a bit more investment here, from my perspective. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we would always love greater investment, I'm sure, and it's that balance, isn't it? Balance of where you spend that public person. Are we kind of, as a trade and standards organisation, working with our partners, kind of targeting those high risk, high harm elements of the investigative, proactive work that we do, which we are. You know, we are an intelligence-led organisation, and actually, if we looked at some of the demand profiling and saying, actually, you know, looking at demand over this year, next year, and the following year, actually what we might get based on our intelligence, we actually, you know, are able then to put a business case to come forward. Just in terms of the partnership, we do, so whilst it's not a formal kind of partnership in terms of the road safety partnership, we actually do work really, really closely with kind of district councils, policing, other kind of bodies in a more informal way, but you know, it's there. That, you know, I don't want you to think just because there's not a formal organisation put in place like the road safety partnership that activity is not happening. That is happening, which is why we've been able to kind of look at what policing made their decisions around. We're able to kind of voice our concerns to policing. It wasn't, you know, they just didn't do it internally. They asked us for our views in terms of what it was they were looking to realign their resources to and what that would impact in kind of partnership activities. But I will say that the commitment is still there. If we have got an operation and where they see a footprint in it and where we have got that partnership, there are still resources to do that. There's just fewer of them, and therefore we you know, the impact is greatly. But the positive news coming out of this is that the government did recognise that. You know, so there is additional funding coming. It's going to enable policing to get back to its what it would consider its base level of resourcing capacity. We just have to manage that for a 6 to 12 month period to allow those new staff to come through the process.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I seem to remember, we've talked about this before, myself, Councillor Brockway and Councillor Kendrick were all on Public Protection Committee, and we talked about trading standards, and it must be a year, 18 months ago, when we said you really do need more money. Do you recall that? So that this isn't something new, and I do absolutely endorse what Councillor Christopher had said. And I just think, as you say, we've had the best local government settlement from national government in 30 years, and we've got almost £50 million in the financial volatility fund. So there really is no excuse for not funding this properly. And what I want to ask is, you do wonder if there's any point after Friday's budget meeting, but I would like the committee clerks to note for the record, please, clearly that some of committee feel that this ought to have better funding, because we do feel that, and I think sometimes in some of the minutes and that it does get a bit lost and a bit generalised. But, you know, what you've both said really is this needs better funding, and it's about community safety. That's what this committee is. So, and it's not true to say that the money isn't there. We've had a decent settlement and we've got 50 million nearly in the volatility fund. So we could fund this properly, but the administration choose not to, and I'd like it to be noted for the record that some of us on this scrutiny committee, whatever the point of it is, do feel it ought to be funded properly. Thank you. Yeah,
we'll just sort of clarify some of the new things that are happening in trade and standards that's probably not yet come to the committee, which is an investment in the teams. So we are looking and have been out for recruitment for a financial investigator. So actually getting a internal and financial investigator within the Trading Standards Service will enable us to kind of relieve some of the work that some of our operational staff are doing, and then outsourcing that to what we currently use as an external financial investigator. So we're looking to invest in that role to enable us to kind of free up some operational time, but also hopefully recoup more money back from the criminals that are stealing it from our communities.
Can I just ask, some of these improvements, are they coming from the extra government money? Is that, or have they been long planned? You know, how?
Yeah, so they've been long talked about and then finally agreed. So it's a case of, you know, we've found budget to enable us to do the recruitment. I can't say exactly which budget line that has come from, but ultimately we have been given the yes to go and do that. So there are opportunities, and I'm also exploring opportunities about how we may support more the team around the illegal vapes and tobacco stuff, as well as an increase in resources. So there are increases being looked at in terms of this proactive activity of the Trading Standards arm. And again, like I say, Mark and I have talked for a long time about the where we can make enhancements and improvements to the service, and had long conversations, you know, and I'm talking over several years that we've been having these conversations. As you will know from the old public protection, been very supportive of an increase. There's some of the elements where we see that there's a really good opportunity, not only for us to invest in those roles and the activity they're doing, but free up other operational activity whilst clawing more money back from criminal activity that we can kind of utilise in a different way.
You know, about your workload and that. So whilst we have got a bit more, and people say, oh, well, you could always have more, but actually you really could do with some more, couldn't you? And I still think that comment needs to be noted in the minutes, that we feel that there is room for more investment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just my query, with the Buy with Confidence scheme, how do we compare with other counties on the uptake?
Very consistent. It's obviously a national scheme run by Trading Standards. Its uptake nationally is a struggle for all. I think particularly due to the economic climate, the other options and competition that's out there with places such as Trust a Trader, Check a Trade, and that's why our scheme is priced competitively compared to those national kind of schemes. But they have a lot of investment, and it's difficult to compete with that kind of advertisement and exposure that they get. But yeah, nationally, it's the uptake is consistent with what we're seeing across the country. It's just a challenge to, one, get those companies on board, those that are interested. I think the auditing process scares them slightly, especially when Trading Standards are kind of involved in that process. But it's certainly something that we've seen has been successful in other areas of the country, and where they've made a good. They've built up a good number of businesses, and the scheme has worked successfully. So no different from anywhere else. I think it's always going to be hard, as Mark referred to earlier, is getting the ball rolling, getting that uptake of businesses on board, and moving forward from there. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you everyone for your comments and questions. So I'm proposing that the committee has reviewed the report and is satisfied with the delivery of the fair trading work undertaken by Trading Standards, and obviously that the comments and will be passed on within the report and the minutes. Can we please raise hands if we agree? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. That's agreed. So we'll move on to item 6, which is the Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Community Risk Management Plan for 2024 to 2028, the annual review. This is on pages 29 to 48 of the agenda pack, and provides an annual update on the work carried out in line with the Community Risk Management Plan for 24-28. The actions required by this committee are to note the information contained within the Community Risk Management Plan Progress Update. This report will be presented by Joe Housestead, the Assistant Chief Fire Officer. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all members present. So the Chair said the purpose of this report is to provide members with assurance and progress how we're managing against our Community Risk Management Plan, which was set in 2024 and runs through 2020 to 2028. Every fire and rescue service in England has to produce a Community Risk Management Plan which identifies the current, future and emerging risks within their communities and what they're doing about it in terms of interventions and measures to reduce the risks within the communities. We also have to comply with the National Framework Document for England, which pretty much sets out how we go about producing the plan and how we share that data and the report with the public. So that was a background on the paper. The main discussion points, so we carried out a full and comprehensive review of our risk profile, and I'll go through a summary of some of the changes and then a summary of some of our priorities. So as part of our horizon scanning section, we've strengthened this by the use of a pest analysis, which gives us a bit more insight and a bit more rich data to be able to use to get insight to the risks within our communities. The technology element of the pest analysis has been broadened to take account of the increase in our communities of battery energy storage systems, alongside the wider increase of use of lithium-ion batteries. And obviously I'm happy to take some questions on those later. In addition, what we also have to build in is look at high-level risk assessments and make sure that what is happening from a national perspective, that also factors within our plans. So that is a summary of the changes. In terms of our priorities, in terms of our prevention work, we have sustainable and scalable interventions in place to mitigate the impact of changing communities. And the service prioritised prevention activity based on risk. So between April 2024 and January 2026, it completed more than 16,000 home fire safety visits by a mixture of our advocates and our crews. Now those ideally are targeted at the most vulnerable members of our communities, and then we can signpost those individuals to various different avenues for care and support from that. We've also invested in a new command and control system within our control room. So we're still working through that project, but this will make our frontline response, so the very first point of a call that comes into our emergency response is our control room. So we've updated that system. We're currently working through that project, and that will make our control room more resilient and more future-proof as we go forward. We've also invested further in our community fire safety officers. So community fire safety, our protection officers we call them, that is our statutory responsibility to regulate commercial premises. So we continue to invest in that department because that gives us a really rich data source to be able to identify any up-and-coming commercial risks so we can address them and also have targeted interventions for the risks that's already present within our communities. On the back of that, we obviously had to comply with the Grenfell Tower recommendations. So there's a number of recommendations that were put to fire and rescue services across England about how they would address those interventions or those measures from the report. We continue to make sure our response model is more sustainable. So just at the start of this year, literally within a few weeks ago, we placed our watch managers, who were basically the officer in charge in front of a fire engine or fire appliance, back in that model. They used to be watch command support officers, which strengthens our frontline response. It also it gives us better oversight from the management from that level of the fire station level right the way up into more the strategic levels. Health and safety remains a priority for all of ourselves and our colleagues and our firefighters. The contaminants agenda, which was pushed through nationally, identified that firefighters are risked to greater risk, should I say, to certain diseases through the exposure of certain gases and chemicals within fires. So we have got a dedicated project to identify and address these issues. So low-level things like zoning stations. In future, we'll look to invest in clean cab policies in new appliances, which will be coming forward in the future, and try and make sure that we're well ahead of the curve when it comes to them risks. We provide training and development facilities that are fit for the future. So we've developed a strategic outline case to develop our training facility at Waddington. We do class that as a really good training facility, but with a little bit of investment and a bit of work going forward, we do think that is still can be a world-class facility that can not only provide first-class training for our crews, but also for crews from other fire services from up and down the country, and if need be, worldwide. And the last couple of things to pick out is we continue to develop a happy and resilient workforce. So our workforce well-being remains a key priority. Unfortunately, we are seeing an increase in mental health type of incidents that our crews respond to, which often can be with tragic circumstances. So it's more apparent this day and age than probably ever that we have correct measures in place to make sure that all our frontline firefighters and all our staff are looked after. So we do have mental health champions. I'm one myself. We have a very broad and extensive trauma support package that we offer to our firefighters if they do experience these type of incidents, and we do have critical incident debriefs following any incident, so that we can really understand the challenges that our firefighters face, and hopefully in the future put more and more interventions in to be able to support them through this work. So in summary, the service is now working to achieve its objectives in the 2024 to 2028 CRMP. Annual delivery plans have been developed and performance is measured to judge the effectiveness of the actions. Further reports will be brought to the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committees to inform on progress. And then further down there was a link to some papers, which the big one was our Community Risk Profile 2024 to 2028. I'm happy to take any questions from members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Yeah, very good report. So we'll invite members to comment and ask questions. I think we've got Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 31, you say going to target people who may be greater risk of fire and other emergencies. And you've listed smoking, but you haven't listed vaping. And I'm wondering if that should be included, as there's been a couple of bad fires in Lincolnshire connected to vapes. And also, very sadly, just recently, air fryers, if that could be updated and included in that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor. I'll make sure those amendments are made, but when we talk about smoking, it would cover all types of smoking. But it is a very valid point that vapes are a form of lithium batteries, and obviously we do aware that there's not recognised products out there where they produce a risk. So thank you for your comments. I'll make sure that is amended and changed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bridgewood.
Thank you, Chairman. Joe, thank you for the report and mentioning what I'm going to mention, which is lithium ion. And I'm not sure if everyone is aware of the big change that lithium ion brings in particular in relation to the smoke. And whilst you mention it, I don't. Is it taken into account lithium-ion batteries go right from like vapes through scooters right up to BESS and everything, and coming from passive fire protection industry, it is a major change. The fire profile's changed. The smoke is completely different, so smoke inhalation is a problem. I know that there's been a tightening up of cross-contamination. All these things are going to have a massive effect on your service. The contamination, cleaning of equipment, and that. And I'm not sure how long and how the cleaning takes, but you're probably going to need more reserve kit, so that's more investment on that side of things. Public awareness of the dangers of lithium ion. I know it's it's out there, not to charge things unattended and stuff like that. And another thing that I don't think has come in this country is domestic battery backup. I know certain states in America have now made it compulsory to actually have a board up at your property if you've got that, domestic batteries, because of the changes in the fire profile and everything like that. And finally, your report has obviously been taken a while to write, and in the last week, I think the National Fire Chief's guidance on best sites has come out, so that presumably isn't included in your report, but moving forward, I take it will be. Sorry, lot there, but it's a very, very broad subject, and I do know a bit about it.
Yeah, thank you very much for your points and your concerns, Councillor. So I'll pick up on some of the points. You're right, this is an emerging risk for Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Service, but also the Fire and Rescue Service nationally. In terms of BESS, I'll cover that one first, if that's all right. So in terms of BESS sites, we are not a statutory consultantee for those sites, which is a little bit problematic, but it's not a challenge that we are aware of and we're not overcome. So obviously they are regulated by the Health and Safety Executive. But the guidance that you talked about, the National Fire Chiefs Council is the council that we sit under, but to publish guidance. What we say to these sites is if you're in the planning stage, you will consult with us then. Please just tell us in the first instance, first and foremost, how you comply with the National Fire Chiefs Council guidance in the first instance, because that document's really robust and really up to date with the correct information. I'm not sure if the honest answer whether that report includes that, because it's only just came out, but I will get you the answer. But I know it will be the previous guidance, which was only updated in 2025 anyway, so there's only minor tweaks. But what we'd expect after the consultation is that a comprehensive risk management process on those sites is undertaken to identify the hazards and risks, to develop and kind of implement strategies, and then from that, this would inform us and them to produce a robust emergency response should, fingers crossed, one of those incidents does not develop. So we do follow the guidance. In terms of lithium-ion batteries, you're right, Councillor, that they're everywhere from mobile phones to huge storage systems. Thankfully, touch wood, due to the numbers and the sheer volume out there, if you give a ratio of the number of batteries and the number of fires that we have, it's still really, really low, but it is a risk, so it's one thing that we are monitoring. So what we do is we do look at every time we have a fire involving of any type of fire, but involving a battery, our fire investigators will feed that back. They'll feed it in locally to us, regionally, and then nationally. So we do look at national trends around lithium-ion batteries and fires. And then we do align our community safety campaigns and our proactive targeting through Facebook and various other measures. So off the top of my head, you've got the Charge Safe campaigns and the Buy Safe campaigns by the government, so they're fire kills campaigns and also NFCC ones. And then the other thing is Electrical Fire Safety Week, which was a couple of weeks ago, the 2nd to the 9th of February. So we did some proactive engagement to the public about these are the risks about buying these products from reputable suppliers, not leaving them unattended when they're charged, to try and reduce the risks to our communities as much as we possibly can. And our comms went out, and obviously Lincolnshire County Council's comms went out around those risks. So I hope that gives you a little bit of assurance about where we are, and that we are aware that your comments are valid, that it is emerging risk, and we'll continue to monitor this as we move forward throughout this plan and into the next plan, which will be 2028 and beyond.
Thank you for that. That is reassuring. I say one big area of concern is the different types of vapour in that. And is there any sort of public awareness been made of that? Obviously, you're saying about the dangers of but charging and everything, but I haven't seen anything outside of people involved in the industry about the dangers of the smoke.
Yeah, so in relation to vapes, we haven't done a specific campaign on those products, what we've done is we've kept it more broad to all lithium batteries, about charging, about if the campaign also identifies that these fires can be rapid, so and give off quite a lot of toxic and venomous smoke, as you've identified. So if members of the public do experience a fire, obviously to leave the property as soon as they possibly can and call the fire and rescue service through 999 is what we do. More generic around lithium-ion batteries information themselves. E-scooters and e-bikes are becoming a bit of a trend as well, which is one of the campaigns that we have done, and colleagues from LFB and London Fire Brigade have done some really good awareness around that, which we share as well through the national networks about the risks from those batteries within those vehicles and within those bikes.
Thank you, Joe. I'm just going to not jump in, but a purely technical question, Joe. To put you on the spot. With the large battery energy storage, it's right that I'm going to make sure I get it right myself. Hydrofluoric acid reacts with moisture. So can we actually deal with a large fire? Do we need suppressant? Do we need specialist appliances to deal with this?
So to answer your question, we can deal with any fire within our communities. The guidance that we're getting and the guidance that's constantly ongoing is to adopt the risk of pouring copious amounts of water on these chemicals. You then make a contaminant water issue with, and part of the Fire and Rescue Service statutory duties, we've got to comply with Environment Agency's regulations. So by pouring copious amounts of water on could present us with a bigger danger than allowing it. So the strategy at the moment for these sites is to adopt a controlled burn. There is product being developed right the way across the globe as well as nationally, which hopefully will get better going forward. But that is the guidance. That's the kind of a stance we have now. Is because back to my point is, it would take huge volumes of water, which then diluted with the chemical become more of a risk to our communities. And if that enters watercourses or something through the environment, then we do more damage than actually letting the fire develop and burned controlled, which we would always be in supervision of and would make sure that obviously the risks to the public were mitigated through that as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. We've got Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just wondering, on page 32, there's a reference to medical bookings. I just wonder if you could explain to me as a newbie what that means. And also on page 34, sort of to do with workforce welfare, there's a report being prepared by psychologists, I believe, if I remember correctly, from Hull University. I was just wondering when that report might be expected. And finally, there's a reference to on vero, again showing my ignorance. What does on vero mean? Thank you, Chairman.
So in terms of the medical bookings, what we've done is we've increased our provision to give staff easier access and better access to ongoing medicals and medical provision. So we've just engaged with a new occupational health provider, which will give us a bit of an increase in availability of those bookings. It's been a bit of a pinch point previously, so we've identified that we need to have a more resilient, should I say, and more robust process going forward. The acronym, if I'm really honest, I will find out that I don't actually know myself, if I'm really honest. So I will come back to you, Councillor, and the piece of work that's wrapped up around that report, if I can come back to you as well, is that unfortunately I'm just not cited on that level of detail. I don't know. I wouldn't like to give you a commitment if it's a month or 2 months. I'd rather get you the absolute clarity of when that research and that work will come back, if that's all right.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report, Joe. Recently on Facebook, there was an advert for fire cadets for Sleaford and Grantham. What is the uptake, or what has been the uptake on this initiative? And is this a good way of recruiting future fire officers or firemen?
Thank you very much for your point and your question. It's a really good one. In terms of the update, I couldn't give you a firm update yet, is because these programmes in those areas are still in infancy, but we are doing them. But to answer your point, it is absolutely, it serves lots of purposes. The big one is recruitment. People come into our premises, they see the types of roles that the Fire and Rescue Service undertake, which gives them a more awareness, which will obviously they will share within the communities and promotes our brand, promotes what we do as firefighters. It also instills a little bit of discipline, a little bit of teamwork within these people. So when they come through the selection processes, that's the types of things that we look for with our firefighters. Can they work in a team? Can they work in an individual? So we do. Our recruitment is multifaceted. We look at recruitment in lots of different areas and using lots of different avenues. So the Fire Cadet Programme is a national programme that's been really successful up and down the country, but does give us an extra layer of our recruitment so that we can attract some of the younger generation, keep them off the streets where we can, get them into our premises, give them some education, but also linked into your point, Councillor, is hopefully the uptake in those people that come forward in the future with those skills that they've built, where they then eventually work their way into Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Services, firefighters, and who knows, there might be a future chief fire officer in one of those as well.
Thank you. Councillor Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report as well, Joe. It's really interesting reading these things. You sort of get elected to these councils and then suddenly your mind's expanded to a whole host of very intense and technical documentation. It's fun going through them all. The report suggests that average response times are easier for the public to understand. However, in a vast county like Lincolnshire, an average could also hide the reality of what we're here to scrutinise to some extent. So if an engine reaches Lincoln city centre in 4 minutes, but it takes 24 minutes to reach a rural farm, the average could look like a success, but for that poor resident or business that's been waiting 24 minutes, that could be a catastrophic failure for them. An outlier isn't just a statistical blip, it's a person or a business, it's jobs, it's people. And I wonder, by moving to this new metric, are we potentially hiding the reality of the rural service challenges that I appreciate we face here? And would you be willing to commit to reporting the longest response times alongside that average so that the committee can see the true risk? But also, if we're no longer going to track the percentage of times, I'm wondering how we can objectively track the service degradation over time, if there is any. And it would be really helpful, I think, to maybe have the new way of tracking that and the old way alongside one another for a year or two, just so that we can see that comparison, because it's really to help us. I mean, I'm sure many of the public love reading through these reports, but ultimately we're here to read through them and check them. And I would find that really useful just to see how the data compares overall and how the messaging's slightly different. But I don't know how my colleagues would feel, but that would be really helpful.
Yeah, thanks for your points, Councillor. So the change in our response times, we went through a consultation in 2023, which came into the new report, the new CRMP in 2024. The way that we look at them and record them brought us broadly in line with how the Home Office want us to record and align them. Your point about identifying outliers, the previous way that we did it is with kind of a mean average of the data is if one of our response times was exceptionally high, that would show as a bit of a blip, but also it wouldn't give us a true reflection of how we were responding across the board. So the way that we do it now is more of a median, so that we look at the middle set of the data to actually say this is a true reflection. Response times themselves quite complex in terms of monitoring them because there's so many factors that influence your response time. Traffic is a one, weather types of year, because obviously we wouldn't expect our firefighters to drive an appliance at speed on blue lights through weather conditions. So you can sometimes put 10, 15, even 20 minutes on those response times because of those factors. And that's why we record it as an average, because it gives us a better reflection of how we get into the communities on an average basis. The previous response standards were set on predominantly the drive time, but the way we report it now, it does give the public a bit easier understanding to say, actually, with the outliers, that is how they're tracking them. To give assurance, Councillor, what we also do is, on our performance boards, we look at every time a performance standard is not met, and we really drill down as to what factors have influenced that. Some are completely beyond our control, like weather adverse weather, like adverse traffic. Even on blue lights, I've done it myself for a number of years, including my response car. It's difficult to make progress, but we always want our firefighters to arrive there safely first and foremost. Because if they don't arrive safely, then it delays the response even further. I can certainly take that away with me if you'd like to see a comparison from the previous response data and how we record it to the new one. That is something definitely we could bring back to the committee if that's what members would like.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great for me. Whenever there's changes like this on the data, I really like to see that overlap, just to sort of see how it's differing year to year. I mean, I hope I'm on this committee for another 3 years, LGR aside. But yeah, I think that's always useful just to see how it's stacking up against the new and the old. And I have absolute confidence that the officers are doing right by us here. So it's not about questioning the changes or anything like that. It's just about seeing that comparison myself and just making sure that it's right, because that's ultimately our duty, is just to make sure this is right on behalf of the public and that it isn't masking anything or anything like that in future, or something hasn't been missed. So thank you.
No, it's a really, really valid point, Councillor, and raised really well. Is that a fire alarm just on?
And through you, the number of times that has happened at this committee when we've had the chief here is just remarkable.
What we've always done, what I was going to say was, what we've done, is different fire services have different makeups across the country. So you've got metropolitan, you've got predominantly rural, and they put them in family groups. So within our family group, we report our response standards exactly the same as the other fire and rescue service within that family group, which ours is predominantly rural. So that allows us also to benchmark not only our local response standards to our communities, but against the other fire services with a very similar nature of road networks and communities within the communities within Lincolnshire with other communities, and it gives us a good indicator of how we actually perform nationally within that group as well. Because we couldn't compare ourselves to a large metropolitan service, which with huge cities, because the infrastructure, the road networks, various other factors we don't have in the more rural parts of the fire and rescue service like Lincolnshire. So I hope that just gives you another level of assurance.
Thank you. Councillor Bamford.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Joe, for the report and your excellent work in this area, which is very much appreciated. So I have one question that I was going to bring, and then I have another question, if I may, that was prompted by another answer. So firstly, on page 30, we talk about sustainable and scalable interventions. I'm assuming that means educational programs for the wider public. So what's the current spend on those initiatives, and how are we tracking whether that spend is having a positive impact on reducing actual incidents? That's the first question. Thank you.
So our scalable interventions, you're right, for our community safety, that's based on the risks. We will scale up what we will deliver in various different suites of activities within the community. So road safety, water safety, all of those avenues. The actual spend, I wouldn't be able to get the figure off the top of my head right this moment, but I can get that to you. What we are looking at, and what other fire services do look at, is something called the economic social value tool. This is in a previous life where before I came to Lincolnshire we have used, so we're going to potentially look at that going forward. So for what that tool does, it came from the National Fire Chiefs Council. For every £1 you spend, basically in terms of community safety, it demonstrates the economic and social value that you can generate from that. So we don't currently do that yet, Councillor, but it's something that potentially we can look at to the future. But to get you the exact figures, and I won't be able to drill down for the costs just yet, but I can provide them a breakdown through our community safety team. So I hope that answers your first question.
Yes, thank you. That's sort of what we're getting at. So for the pound we're spending, what is the actual impact on reducing those incidents? So thank you for that. Hopefully we can get those figures in a future meeting perhaps, and an update on that. So my second question that was prompted by a previous answer was when we're talking about the battery storage sites, the larger sites, and you said we currently don't have the capacity or the technology to put those fires out, so we allow a controlled burn. So my second question is, what is the typical burn time for one of those sites, and what kind of chemicals are produced into the atmosphere as a result of that burn? Thank you.
So the current national strategy is to adopt a controlled burn because of the chemicals and the products that's given off from combustion. In terms of burn time, that would be really, really hard to calculate because it would depend on the number of megawatts in the site, what's stored within the site, etc., and if the fire involved other things. In terms of gases, in terms of other products produced from the fire as well, it is also really hard to predict because different sites they may be linked to, residential areas, they may be linked to other commercial buildings. There's different things stored at these sites, so depending on whether it's plastics, whether it's other chemicals, whether it's other fuels, when they're mixed, when they burn, it's very, very difficult to predict what gases are given off. We can use data, though. We can use our fire modelling and sort of plume modelling through our systems to basically direct us to say where is the smoke plume going, and then obviously we can put measures in to reduce the risks from that. If we project where the plume is going, we can then obviously, if it is impacting on some communities, we could take in a stance of maybe looking to evacuate those, or we'll do warning and informing, which is stay indoors and close windows, etc., etc.
Yeah, thank you. And the point of the question was exactly that. If we're allowing a site to burn for a period of time and it's producing toxic chemicals, especially in residential areas, I just wonder how much has that been considered in the wider, there's a lot of these sites projected now. Has that been properly considered? Is there any sort of literature or assessments being conducted? I'm sure there has, but I'd like to see those if that's possible, even at a national level. Thank you.
Yeah, that's not a problem. Yeah, we do monitor all the risks in our communities regularly. What I would say, Councillor, is every fire that we go to produces various different chemicals and various different gases, which can all have quite significant consequences for the environment and for our communities. If you take a normal standard dwelling, for example, this day and age, plastics, foam, wood, you name it, when a fire develops, even in a small compartment, it's not just one thing that's burning. It could be 50, 60, 70 and above different types of substances. And so the gases that each one of those produces will then mix and produce more and more gases. So our strategies are largely dependent on the risks that were presented in front of us, and then our interventions will be tailored to those. And if that means in warning and informing, which you see a lot with the Fire and Rescue Service do, to close doors and windows and stay indoors, the next part of that is sometimes we advise residents to evacuate from a certain area, which we'd always do. The public are our biggest concern, and our biggest we will always make sure that the risks to those are reduced as much as we possibly can, with working with other emergency services colleagues, which is what we always do.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and if we could get perhaps offline that data and those risk assessments. So I appreciate what you're saying about any fire produces potential contaminants, but what we're talking about here is introducing a new suite of potential fire hazards. Largely, particularly in my community, they're not wanted. So I'd like to have that data if that's possible. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I won't be able to make the training visit, but it's not because I'm not interested. I can't get. Okay. I've got a couple of questions. Page 34 talks about attracting a diverse workforce, and historically that's been a challenge. And I'm not a pedant about this. I don't think you've got to have absolutely equal numbers, etc., etc. But it's always been difficult to attract females, particularly because of the shift pattern. And I just wondered basically how that was going. I think it's important because the communities, if you think of the situations, the crews need to reflect the communities they're going out to. And I think you go to other communities as well sometimes if there's a big fire, don't you, like in the summer. That was my first point. And the second point was around staff well-being. You talked about an increase in mental health issues. I just wondered about sort of what kind of scale that's on, you know, and just to say, I note your point about EMDR therapy. I've done a bit of reading about that. I'm quite impressed that people are offered that. That's really positive. Yeah, so just those 2 points, thank you.
Yeah, so our recruitment processes, you're right, Councillor, we always try and attract a more diverse workforce to the Fire and Rescue Service. I think it's a challenge in Lincolnshire, but I think it's a challenge nationally as well. Every recruitment campaign that we do, we will do positive action days, we will, through our cadet programme, through various different avenues, we'll try and signpost as many people as we can to come forward through the process. We are getting better. You are right. It's still a lot of work to do in this area. It's still a long way to go, but we are getting better in Lincolnshire and nationally to address this issue. But it's always highest on the agenda when we come to do a recruitment campaign. We'll do full quality impact assessments on what we're about to do to make sure that not only attract the best candidates, but we also try and broaden our equality, diversity and inclusion for everybody in the communities. Because I think Fire and Rescue Services now will want that everybody should have equal access to applying for a role that they think they can do, and it's our job to be able to obviously coach and tell them that they can do it, and then hopefully come forward. So it is an improving picture, but I will say that there's still a lot of work to do in this area going forward. In terms of staff wellbeing, you're right. Again, I think it's a change in societal factors. I think it's a change nationally where fire services are seeing more exposure to more mental health and sort of crisis situations that we're being involved with. Some of that's due to pressures from other agencies, but there's various different factors. So I think it's really important, probably more important than now than any days, that we do cater for our staff's health, safety and well-being, I would say. So we do, like I said before, critical incident debriefs. You were probably all aware of the incident that only happened a matter of a couple of weeks ago, the tragic incident. But what we did is on that one particularly as well, as we got our ambulance colleagues and some of our police colleagues and the fire service all back together at the local fire station to have a wellbeing session. We brought some external people in to be able to speak to people. And there's really well embedded processes within our fire control room. So even someone like me as a strategic officer, if I go to an incident, control will ring me. It will be a private call, as it is to our firefighters, to say, Joe, you've just experienced this. Do you want to access any type of support networks or any way we can help? So we do need to keep improving on there. We're pretty good at it, but because the change in the risks and change that our firefighters are being exposed to, we'll keep working to better that offer.
Do you keep any record of the I don't want it, and I'm not pedantic about it. I just to have some idea of how much the scale has gone up of mental health problems.
I don't think they record the number of the increase, but I think what is in terms of qualitative data, but in terms of quantitative data, we know that the changes in the incidents that we're going to, 90% of them now are having an impact on the community and on the firefighters, and they're just the scale of the incidents that we're involved with. So it's absolutely paramount now, as it always was, that we make sure our staff are looked after and their well-being is the top of our priority. I don't know if, Councillor, if there's any national data out there that would suggest anything, but I will look into it for you and get it back to you. No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. I noted, thanks for the report. Really good. I noticed that you're really basically digitalising everything that you possibly can, which is what we all do. Some years ago, this council had a massive cyber attack, which took the council out for about a week, and people realised that they couldn't phone each other because they didn't have their phone numbers because it was all digitalised. Do you have a robust backup which is separate from your system? And if so, can you give us some information? In the end, our people, a lot of them went to pen and paper. They wrote the phone numbers down because nobody can screw that up. But it was an awful time. It was a very serious thing. So what have you got in place? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor. And it's perfectly timed, to be honest. Literally a couple of weeks ago, I sat in a cyber security exercise that we did. It was facilitated by the Home Office. It looked at the wider County Council and Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Service. We got the report literally a couple of days ago that said that we performed really, really well within that area. The redundancy, the backup, the resilience are the words I would use, were actually commented on to a good level of security. So that if we did subject to any cyber attack or anything like that, our business continuity arrangements were very robust. There's some learning in there, which, you know, we'll get the report from them, and then we can take that forward to improve even further. What they're also going to do is, they've already done this in a number of fire and rescue services, they're going to do it in a few more, and then we'll look at that as well, and we'll allow to be able to benchmark ourselves to where our results are against other fire and rescue services, see where we can improve further. We regularly review our business continuity arrangements for all areas of our business. We've got to, as emergency services, we've got to make sure our backups are robust, so that if we do, you know, present us with any significant challenges, that the business continuity arrangements actually stack up. And we do have a full test and exercise program around those. So we test and exercise regularly in the control room, regularly at the front line, and across all of our functions, whether it be prevention, protection or response. So I hope that gives you a level of assurance to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bridgewood.
Thank you, Chairman. It's really to add to a bit of Joe's response to Councillor Bamford. For a single container, you're talking at least 24 hours. And the defensive approach would be to prevent the spread to other containers. And in terms of the fumes that get off, the new fire chief's guidance requires the applicant to map the locality and identify risk areas, which can range from schools, dwellings, road junctions and everything like that. So I think if we're applying the new guidance correctly, that is going to reduce the number of sites, potential sites in Lincolnshire. So I think it's really, really good news that it's worth looking at. It's only available on the National Fire Chief's website, but it is very, very comprehensive, covers a lot of areas.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to what Councillor Bamford was saying about the BESSes, the RAF have set fire to aircraft on airfields every month, every week, whatever, and they have a practice. Have the Lincolnshire Fire Service thought about setting fire to a BESS and doing a test fire so that you can see how difficult this is to put out?
It's a very good suggestion, Councillor. To be honest, we haven't thought about it yet. It's getting access to that technology, and it's working with somebody in industry who would supply it to us, because it is really, really expensive. I think the research would be really valuable, but I know the stuff that's being done at the national level, National Fire Chiefs Council, that's where that type of work would sit, because then what they tend to do with the national research is they would bring in some experts, maybe some universities, to evaluate exactly how the fire performed and then share the learning nationally. So we haven't done it yet in Lincolnshire, but it's not saying that we won't do it in the future. But to echo other councillors' comments, we do align with that guidance. So the National Fire Chiefs guidance comes into our protection team, and then we make sure that our stance is in line with what everybody else is doing nationally from that guidance.
Thank you. Do you use any information reference these lithium battery fires, like the one at High Dyke, the recent one at High Dyke last year, which the company always tend to blame on lithium batteries being chewed up. So if lithium batteries are being chewed up on these conveyor lines, why aren't they being picked off the conveyor lines before they get chewed up?
Yeah, it is a good point. What we also do as well is we do regular testing and exercise. So we'll theme exercises around various different events and various different fires. So lithium-ion batteries is a one, for example. We're doing a one tomorrow night, actually, which is a simulated car park fire. So that is an exercise that we do with our fire crews, but within that, within a car park, you will have electric vehicles, quite a lot of them which in the community these days, as well as other fuel-powered vehicles. So it's back to the councillor's point, that could happen in anywhere, but with the different products, the different vehicles, the different fuels, it's important that we understand how things may perform. But again, there's that many different products that would combust during a fire. It's really, really difficult to predict the exact gases that would come off those fires. But what we do is we put measures in place to make sure that risks to the public are reduced as much as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thanks for your comments and questions. Thank you, Joe. This concludes the discussion. So I'm proposing that the committee is satisfied with the contents of the report, and we have been assured on the information contained within the Community Risk Management Plan Progress Update. And we'll also ensure that comments are added into the minutes. Can we please raise hands if we agree? I think that is unanimous. That is agreed. Thank you very much. We'll just have a very brief 5-minute comfort break. So we'll literally be back here for 11:35, please. Right, thank you everyone. So item 7 is just the community safety work programme. This is on pages 49 to 58 and sets out the committee's planned work programme for 2026. The actions required are to review and agree the work programme as set out in the report and highlight for discussion any additional scrutiny activity which could be considered for inclusion within the work programme. The report will be presented by Hannah Colclough, our Scrutiny Officer. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. So our next meeting will be on the 31st of March. We've got 4 substantive items scheduled at the moment. The LFR replacement of 12-ton MAN appliance, the service level performance reporting for Q3, the LFR Waddington training facility, and then sitting as the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee, the Domestic Abuse Strategy update. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Does any members have any comments or questions? No, I think we're okay on that one. So I'm proposing that we approve the planned work programme for 2026, subject to anything that's being discussed. Can we raise hands if we agree? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. That's agreed. So for the final item, we're going to sit as the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee under Section 19 of the Crime and Justice Act 2006, which is for item 8 only, the final item on today's agenda. So item 8 is the Antisocial Behaviour Project update. This is on pages 59 to 68 of the agenda pack and will provide an update on the Antisocial Behaviour Project. Members are invited to review the contents of the report and seek assurance on the delivery of the Antisocial Behaviour Project work undertaken by Community Safety and Positive Futures. This report will be presented by Claire Newborn, our Head of Community Safety, and Beck, Community Safety Service Development Manager, with support from David Samper, Practice Supervisor, Future for Me. Over to Claire and Anne.
Thank you, Chair, and really pleased to be able to bring this paper somewhat belatedly to this committee. So for those committee members who may not have been part of the Public Protection Committee in 2024, the Antisocial Behaviour Project came about following a paper that came to that committee in May 2024 that outlined the scope of a project where there would be 2 key strands of activity, one relating to children, one relating to adults, based on the available evidence as to what would be most impactful in terms of those groups of individuals, and it was supported by full council's commitment to investing 1 million of non-recurrent funding, as I say, with the ambition to tackle and reduce antisocial behaviour across Lincolnshire. So the intention was to bring an update paper to the committee in the following 12 months, which took us to May 2025, which then coincided with Purdah and the elections and a revised work programme. So this is the first opportunity and the first update to this committee on that, on the Antisocial Behaviour Project. So I intend to just cover off the 2 strands of activity, that being the adult strand and then the children's strand. So I've described in the paper that in terms of the adult strand of the project, there was some work that was done that identified 37, in 2024 this was the analysis, 37 repeat and vulnerable victims of antisocial behaviour, and evidence would suggest that working with repeat and vulnerable victims is really quite effective, and that is why we looked at that cohort of individuals as a focus for what is quite a small scale project. It would have amounted to 3 staff members, so again we had to be really considered about where we invested that staff resource. So we were looking at that cohort of individuals in the first instance. Post coming to this committee, though, that data was refreshed in terms of that cohort. So when we were looking at mobilising our operations, we refreshed the cohort and did what we kind of paused mobilisation to actually look at some more in-depth information gathering in respect of a refreshed cohort of 17 individuals. So we again looked at various sources of data. Again, they were repeat vulnerable adult victims of ASB. And we looked at adult care data under the information sharing agreements, again utilised police data, had the support of our district council colleagues and public health. What we were trying to do was actually understand where these individuals had already kind of touched services, because a number of them had got quite a kind of a lengthy history of engagement and sometimes disengagement with services, and we were trying to kind of understand how they'd pass through the system, if you like, to actually inform our operational response. What I've detailed in the paper is some of the findings from that piece of work, and it was really quite interesting when we did that deeper dive, because those individuals, as I say, were touching a number of services already, and a number of them, as I was saying, just to summarise, were predominantly female, and were predominantly over 50, and some of those being over 65. And you'll see there in terms of the findings that there were a significant number who had 15 of the 17 who had multiple kind of underlying what we'll refer to as complexities that were likely to have kind of contributed to the circumstances of the reported and social behaviour. So impaired cognitive function was a real kind of standout feature for these individuals. And when we talk about that, I'm referring to diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health issues, but also dementia, the various forms of dementia, learning difficulties and disabilities, and even brain injuries we saw on more than one occasion. It is also important to recognise that within that cohort that there were a number of individuals who were considered not only to be a repeat victim of antisocial behaviour, but actually there were some allegations having been levelled at them in terms of perpetrating antisocial behaviour that had required some kind of enforcement activity either by police or district council colleagues. So there were a range of other complexities in respect of this cohort of individuals, including, there was some history there within the records of services that showed that they'd experienced financial harm or exploitation. Domestic abuse was, again, not an uncommon feature. So there were some of those individuals who were being discussed at our county's multi-agency risk management conference, referred to as MARAC, and substance misuse. Again, drug or alcohol use was a feature. So what we identified from that work with a number of partners was that I suppose the consensus is that where individual agencies had been as proactive as they possibly could be within the limitations of their own organisation's guidance or policies and procedures, what appeared to be evident, given the complexities of these individuals, is where we could have improved on that multi-agency collaborative response. Particularly where people were missing appointments, where they were rejecting or not receptive to support. So what we then did was we paused the operational intentions in terms of the adult strand of the project because it was clear, and again really keen to make best use of the of public investment, because this £1 million is public money, and we wanted to make sure that was going to have or make the best effect for these individuals. Is what was clearly going to be required was the involvement of multiple organisations. So this was a much bigger issue than just for Lincolnshire County Council, community safety and our ASB project. So actually there was a bit of a question mark over the viability or the potential future success of what we'd intended to deliver under that adult strand of the project, because what we clearly needed to do was focus on system change rather than actually delivering, having another kind of operational strand, another team of individuals, because the evidence would suggest is that all of the necessary components were there for these individuals. They were already receiving a range of services, they were already being discussed in a multitude of forums, but actually what perhaps was missing, or what could have been improved upon, was knitting all of those component parts together. So it was very much just kind of a systemic issue rather than anything else. So this aligns really neatly with the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Adults Board strategy, so a paper was taken to the LSAB executive where, because as I say, it aligned with their keeping people safe prevention strategy, and yeah, very much sat really comfortably in that broader prevention framework. And I've put in there, I've written in an extract of that prevention strategy, should you wish to read that. So this was about those individuals, and there were other, I suppose it was a perfect storm really, because there was the learning from our project, but at the same time there was some other evaluations that had been done that focused on those adults with complex co-occurring presenting issues, and there was clearly work to be done in that field, and the LSAB is, in terms of governance and taking this work forward, was the perfect home for this work. And the executive agreed that we're going to look at, I support that board as well, which is what I'm saying, we rather than them, that we're going to be looking at setting up a project group to take this work forward as a collective, as a multitude of agencies, because it clearly requires a multi-agency response rather than any single agency thinking that it's going to be able to resolve some of these issues for some of these individuals. So that project board's currently being mobilised. We have a proposed scope for the project, and a paper's going to the executive imminently. So we are kind of on the periphery of kind of taking that into the action phase, if you like. So it will feel as though that there's been, you know, it's taken quite a long time for us to come to fruition. But actually it's taken a lot of time and energy to and involvement of a number of agencies to gather this evidence, to make sure that whatever we do is really robust and grounded in that evidence, which actually historically is something that we've known has been a bit lacking in the antisocial behaviour space, is that granular detail. So it's, whilst it took some time, it's really valuable work that, again, this funding has helped support. So, excuse me. Moving on then, excuse me. Apologies. Moving on to the children's strand. So the children's strand, to explain it simply, we refer to as the Beyond Project, and hopefully I think if in some of the media that's around the Beyond Project at the moment, hopefully in your localities you may have already heard around this project, but it is a collaborative piece of intervention between Futures for Me, Positive Futures service area, which Dave manages, and community safety, our Stay Safe team, who deliver preventative education in schools. So it's a visible community response. This was, as we always envisaged it to be as part of this project. And it's for young people and for the communities in which those young people reside to address public perceptions, amongst other objectives, of antisocial behaviour and young people. It's designed as a universal offer to children, so we will identify a locality based on data and all of the available evidence as to where we might be seeing antisocial behaviour to be on an upward trajectory in the county. Again, it's a small scale, small number of staff, so again we have to be really careful that we direct those staff to where they could be most impactful. So there is a project board, and the evidence and data is brought to that project board, and there is a consensus as to which locality the Beyond project will focus on, and that will then see 12-week programme consisting of, keep pointing at Dave, but consisting of 2 strands, school and community. And obviously working to the same outcome. So the school is a 6-week preventative education programme that the Stay Safe officer goes to secondary schools and works with small groups of 8 and 9-year students. And then there's the street-based detached work and community sessions, again, over that 12-week period that includes a 6-week leadership group programme. But what I've then put in terms of, just to say in terms of evidence-led delivery, the locations for Beyond, as I mentioned, are based on analysis of data. Our initial data for identified Sleaford. Now, I've got to be honest that I think Sleaford was where we first went. I think there was a lot of learning in terms of the interventions that was delivered while we were in Sleaford. So we almost see that as our pilot site. And the learning has obviously then enhanced the offering that we've been able to deliver in the next locality, which is Gainsborough, and in the current locality, which is Louth. Just looking through the paper, apologies. So I'm just thinking in terms of Louth, where we currently are, just to give you an example when we're looking at choosing the location, Louth and Lincoln City were actually 2 of our kind of considerations for the intervention. So whereas we look at the data, and again we're looking at that, you know, looking at youth, ASB and crime being on that upward trajectory, we also consider and give some consideration to things like what interventions are already being delivered in that locality, because what we don't want to do is duplicate effort. So we will give some thought to, as it was then at the time, hotspot policing initiatives, where the Beyond, where the Positive Futures Service core team already are sited in certain localities and where they may not be. And we kind of take that into account when we think about where this intervention would bring most benefit. So what I just want to cover, because that's the most salient point, I suppose, is that preliminary analysis of work that's been delivered in those locations. As I say, looking at on page 64 in terms of Sleaford, what you will see is the blue kind of dashed line, and the mauve purple line is where the project was being, the start of the Beyond project started and finished. Now, what I just would flag is that the red line, you will see that where I talk about we try and mobilise at a point where we can see the trajectory of ASB and crime going up. for all sorts of kind of recruitment issues and such like, and us kind of getting our operations up and going, that probably are starting in Sleaford, we'd already started to see that kind of plateauing out probably. Whereas when you look on page 65, where we were, I would like to say, much more slicker in terms of mobilising once we've had the data and said we need to invest some time and energy at Gainsborough, you'll see, again, similarly, that we mobilised much quicker at a point where those issues were being seen in terms of prevalence. But importantly, I suppose, and they're the bits I'll repeat here, that even in terms of Sleaford, where we did a lot of learning, I think it'd be fair to say, as our pilot site, is that that the visual chart shows that since the start of the Beyond project, it then experienced a sharper decline in ASB than was seen elsewhere across Lincolnshire, and that from the start of the project to the work ending, there'd been a 2.8% decrease, whereas across Lincolnshire we'd only seen a decrease in that by 0.1%. Now, what we will do, one of the ambitions of the project is to sustain any kind of positive progress. It is a time-limited piece of intervention, but we do monitor the rates of ASB as it and crime as it relates to children and young people beyond the project leaving the area. So, because what we want to be able to see is that that progress is sustained. So, and as you'll see with Sleaford, we've continued to see that the rates of ASB continue to decline. Same in Gainsborough, as I say, it's early days. We only left. When did we leave Gainsborough? December. I was about to say December. Just make sure I was right. So again, it's early days to look at whether that progress was or is being sustained, but we'll continue to monitor that. But again, what we see as a really good news story is that during the that intervention in terms of the Beyond project, and you'll see the visual in terms of the graph. Since the start of the project, there's been a 6.5% decrease, whereas in Lincolnshire as a whole, there was only a 2.9% decrease. Now, interestingly as well, in terms of the profile of ASB that we're seeing in those localities, that's an important thing to note. So, with Sleaford, the primary, in terms of if you were to ask the community what was troubling them and what they were experiencing the most in terms of youth ASB, it was inconsiderate behaviour. So actually, when we look at the reductions in ASB, and we then, I know, appreciate it's not in these graphs, but I do have that data if people would appreciate seeing that, is that what we've seen in terms of the nature, because ASB covers a broad range of behaviours, is that actually it's inconsiderate behaviour that we've seen that reduction in. So hopefully a very positive outcome and impact for the communities. And similarly with Gainsborough, the primary kind of concern there, and what we saw the greatest reduction in, was violent crime with or without injury. And that contributed to 50% of that 6.5% decrease. And again, the soft intelligence we knew, and through the hotspot policing project that was being delivered in Gainsborough, that local partners had shared a concern about organised fights. So again, that was something they were particularly experiencing, and it's one of the things that we've seen a particular decrease in. So a really positive outcome. So I'm going to bring it to a close there, because I want to leave the committee with lots of time for questions. What I would say, obviously, is that I hope from the report that the committee feels assured that we're making good use of that financial investment. Again, because of the adult strand of the project not kind of mobilising as was originally envisaged, then obviously there is an underspend because some of that funding hasn't been utilised in the way that we originally envisaged. What we will be looking to do is obviously see what the Safeguarding Adults Board may develop with partners in terms of that project and what they might need in terms of financial bolstering in terms of the adults, vulnerable adults cohort. But otherwise, the Beyond project, the investment for that and the financing of that, we have got that commitment through that funding that takes us to the start of 2027-28 financial year. So we've still got another year of delivery. Just hot off the press, we have had the data because whilst we're in a locality and we're in Louth at the moment, we're already looking for when we move to the next location. So we do some preliminary work to prepare for arriving at a particular location as we're already working in another area. The data again would suggest that we need to give as a project board some thought to either working and taking our Beyond project to Boston or Skegness. But as I say, there are a number of other considerations for those localities over and above the data. So watch this space, but it will be coming to one of those localities in the coming months, around May time. I think that'll be looking at April. So that'll be in April. Happy to take any questions. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you for the report and thank you for everything that your team is involved in. We've got Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I apologise if I didn't see it in the report. It doesn't state what the take-up from the secondary schools has been. I mean, when you pick an area, do you then contact the secondary schools? And I was just wondering what the response has been from them and what the uptake has been. And has it been a positive response from them? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I keep having to take I need to get varifocals. That's my learning for the day. Thank you, Councillor Smith. It is referenced, actually, if I can just draw your attention. You're okay, to page 63. So in terms of the project reach, the top line, preventative education secondary, it refers to 185 children. So if I can give Gainsborough as an example, because that was an interesting case in point. Yes, what we do in terms of preparing to reach out to a particular locality is that the Stay Safe manager, Catherine, because we're obviously kind of have quite a well-developed relationship with our local schools through our Stay Safe delivery, is she makes that approach. What we decided to do, excuse me, in terms of Gainsborough though, interestingly, is that there was a school that took a large number of Gainsborough young people that actually kind of falls outside of what would be traditionally, and forgive me, I can't remember the school's name. Curtin Academy, I'm reliably told. So again, because those individuals, although that's outside of our kind of official kind of catchment area, their potential behaviour and wanting them to benefit from this intervention was really important to us, because when they come back home and when they're in the communities, it's Gainsborough and our Gainsborough community that feels the effects of that. So we actually also reached out to that school as well. I've got to say, as I say, we have a really good relationship with our schools, particularly through our Stay Safe work over a number of years. That if they know that that's something that we're delivering, we've got quite a good reputation with them, and they're always really keen to take up the offer. And as I say, what this is a universal offer. We're not targeting any particular children. We're just going in to say, in this locality, we want to offer this intervention and some of these opportunities for our young people. You let us know how you want to manage that and who you want us to deliver that activity to. So they kind of approach us with numbers and those, as I say, we don't, target anybody specific. We're very much guided by them as to who we deliver it to. But the take-up's always, I think, very healthy.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just wondering, obviously this is all new to me and probably everybody else, is this entirely innovative project, or have you looked at models elsewhere across the country? That's my first question. The second one is, what's the definition of inconsiderate behaviour in the programme? And thirdly, do you link in with the knife crime project, which is based in Sleaford, which I visited a few years ago? I was just wondering how it all, integrating things and coordinating things, obviously so important in any sort of service. Thank you.
I didn't turn it off. So, thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Actually, that's one of the benefits, I suppose, of community safety being involved in this project, because part of what my service does is we support the county's community safety partnership. So we're really well versed in working in partnership with others on matters such as antisocial behaviour. So we already have those relationships and forge those links with people. So one of the teams we work really closely with is the police's preventative education team, who are responsible for the Happening Knife Crime Project in Sleaford. And actually, again, they work really closely with our Stay Safe team because they do the same thing. But so the Stay Safe partnership, they're all under that umbrella. So that's one of the things that I like to think we do very well, is that we can come in and knit all of these, what otherwise might sit as separate, independent kind of entities and interventions. We have that kind of holistic view and can say, did you know that there's the Aspirations programme, for example, and did you know that Lincoln City Football Foundation are delivering something in Sleaford? And that's one of the points of this, is to bring and galvanise all of those potentially independent parts together to best effect. That worked really well, I've got to say, in Gainsborough, because we had really great engagement from colleagues in West Lindsey District Council particularly, and obviously we had the benefit of Positive Futures have a kind of a core team within that locality, and we were able to pick their brains and what relationships and services and assets they had within that locality. So it's about kind of bringing it all together for the greater good. So although this is funded by the County Council's very generous kind of £1 million, the success of it is almost, it's because we're building on the collective kind of efforts of everybody, really, in those locations. Louth will be interesting, because actually one of the reasons why we looked at Louth was it doesn't necessarily have the same kind of services and available interventions as you would find in, for example, Lincoln City and Gainsborough. So actually that was one of the reasons why we wanted to make an offer for Louth, but actually some of the learning from that locality might be quite different, because some of the challenges with even booking venues is an issue that's we're acutely experiencing at the minute in Louth, that we would never have had an issue with, say, in Gainsborough. And apologies, I've drifted, Councillor Kendrick, so can you bring me back to your first part of the question?
Yeah, the one was, is it entirely innovative project, or have you looked at models elsewhere, if such models exist? And the other one was, what's the actual definition of inconsiderate behaviour in the programme?
Yeah, so I don't know whether Martin, with his ex-police hat on, can, because it's a policing term, if you like, in terms of inconsiderate behaviour, there's a definition in terms of the recording of what would be considered inconsiderate behaviour. And I know Martin will know it probably off the top of his head. Am I right, Martin?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can. But I can't maybe give it you verbatim, but I can give you kind of the abstract. So it's under the Antisocial Behaviour and Crime and Policing Act of 2014. There you go. So it's antisocial behaviour is behaviour that causes or is likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress to people outside the perpetrator's household. So it's that kind of public space antisocial behaviour. And it's normally badged into 3 areas. So it can be sort of personal ASB, so where someone is targeting an individual for whatever means that is. So there's a personal antisocial behaviour element. There's a nuisance one where that's kind of causing annoyance, trouble or suffering to the community. So, you know, where we kind of talk about, you know, very much the perception of young people, you know, as operating as gangs, wandering around parks, villages, you know, does cause people anxiety. So that's, you know, it's a common misnomer, which is very much what we're trying to kind of influence and intervene with the positive futures element. And then there's the environmental stuff, so where we kind of destroy or upset the environment. So sometimes tipping, litter and elements can be seen as antisocial behaviour. But in the context of this programme, we're very much looking at that kind of public space element, or where an individual is being targeted for one reason or other. Does that help with the definitions element?
Yeah, sorry,
I think so. And the other one was the
innovation.
Yeah, is it innovation or is it based on models?
I would certainly say, I think from, I'd like to think in terms of internally for the county council, this collaboration between Positive Futures sitting within Futures for Me and Children's Services and Community Safety, Stay Safe. Again, although we're different parts of, you know, we're in different directorates, sometimes we kind of sit in separate directorates. So actually us coming together and working as a, you know, in terms of shared goals and ambitions, that's I think, you know, fairly newish for the council, to be honest. But actually, again, you know, a lot of this is grounded in evidence. So we do look, and Dave might have more to say on that in terms of the Beyond Project concept, certainly in terms of Positive Futures, but even the, you know, the Youth Matters strategy that the government's just published, again, very much, if you read that now, knowing about the Beyond Project, there's a number of things that it's now kind of highlighting as really valuable interventions and services to support young people. And as I read it, it ticks most of the boxes in terms of the Beyond Project. I was like, well, yeah, we're doing that, and yeah, we're doing that. So, and also we look at the available body of evidence in terms of what they call what works. So you can Google that and it will bring up what works in this space. Targeting places is something that we know in terms of antisocial behaviour is particularly effective. So again, we're targeting particular localities, say in terms of Gainsborough, but then we work with local police and the district councils about what parts of that locality can be particularly vulnerable to youth ASB. So again, that softer intelligence around, you know, what parks, recreational areas do we need to make sure that we have a visible presence. And again, we know that that can be, and the research will tell you, is really impactful. And again, just not to forget in terms of that adult strand of the project, because although that feels as though it's not materialised as we saw, it's still very much a really kind of meaningful intention to do as a partnership. And again, for antisocial behaviour when it comes to adults, one of the things we know is really effective is having a really good, robust, effective response to repeat and vulnerable victims. So again, rather than looking at all adult ASB, which is predominantly ASB when you look at the percentage, I haven't got the figures to hand, but is predominantly an adult issue, whereas sometimes the perception is it's always youth on a, you know, in the town centre on a street corner. And again, that's a perception issue predominantly. The figures would tell you different. But rather than looking at all that adult ASB, what we know is really effective, which is why we agreed to look at that cohort of repeat vulnerable victims stroke callers of ASBs, where you're going to best spend your investment and your money if you've got a finite amount of. Is that right?
Thank you very much, Claire. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. thank you ever so much. This is an outstanding report, and your feedback on it, it's just, oh, well, thank you, Anne. It's one of the best reports I've read in a very long time. It really resonates with where I live as well, actually. And I've just made some notes here. I think nearly all of our communities are affected by ASB. And the thing is that change doesn't happen by accident. You have to put some resources in and do something to initiate that change. And we've all heard the people all go on about, oh, in my day, I walked 10 miles to school and back chewing on an OXO cube, and I was grateful for that, you know. But actually, we are where we are now, and we have to do something to tackle. I was quite surprised by what you said about it being mainly an adult issue. I think where I live, that would perhaps focus on drugs and having had a conversation with the police. Yeah, but, you know, youths as well. I do wonder how strong the link is between deprivation and ASB. I would think it's fairly strong. Looked on here, sorry if I'm jumping about, page 62 does talk about building self-awareness, emotional resilience, decision-making skills, and I would think that that's absolutely true. If you give these kids a sense of pride in their communities and purpose, and actually reinforce the self-esteem, because if they've been knocked back for so many years that they think that just rubbish, they might as well go out and vandalise the subway or whatever. That's exactly what they're going to do, isn't it? And it is about actually changing that, actually. I wanted to ask, first of all, it mentions in the report about funding. Is this sustainable? Is funding going forward a challenge, or is there some funding to keep this going? Because it absolutely, as I've said about the integrated lifestyle service, is absolutely value for money. You know, if you're going to spend money, you might as well put it into doing something positive rather than actually put in vandalism and paying for extra police officers. Do something positive with that funding. So is it sustainable? Mainly, and just really well done. I think this is a great report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Yeah. And thank you for the compliments. As I ought to have said at the start, that I have Anne Beck to thank for the paper. I did some minor tweaks, but I can't take credit for it. It's Anne's work. So in terms of sustainability, it is funding that, as I say, it's non-recurrent. So it will take us to 27-28 financial year, but there's nothing forthcoming after that. What I would say, though, is what is also kind of happening in that kind of national context, and I've referenced it already, is that the Youth Matters strategy that the government's published with a clear intention to commit several £1 million to almost remobilising the youth service and youth provision and youth resources. I was speaking with Dave only this morning about have we heard what that might look like in terms of pounds and pence, which, you know, because they've given kind of this big figure, but what that might mean for Lincolnshire, I think, is some way in the future. But we will expect something. And again, when you look at what the government want to see that benefiting, it does tick a lot of the boxes in terms of positive futures. So I probably might not be the decision maker when it comes to the allocation of that money, but you would like to think that there's a potential to invest and sustain certainly the Beyond project going forward. Because again, actually, we could do more in more localities. So for example, with Boston and Sleaford, if we had a bigger team, we could do both locations rather than having to choose one. But again, with a finite resource, we're evidencing an impact where we can for as long as
Front of Martin, just to say, if it would be useful, I can arrange a meeting with Lincoln's MP, Hamish Faulkner, and you can lobby. Well, we can lobby and make your case, because I'd absolutely like to see more of this come locally.
We would certainly welcome that. I think any support we can get for this area of business is really, really important. I think it's the funding. This is the kind of the first time that we have done this. So we do have Futures for Me. We do have Positive Futures that are kind of working, with baseline resources. And what this money's enabled us to do is kind of, increase that resourcing in a targeted way. So really looking at, rather than that baseline offer across the county. This is about a targeted intervention to bolster and make those connectivities for the longevity of the change programme. That says that 27-28 will be here very, very soon, and we need to make sure, and this is part of this, bringing these outcomes to scrutiny and having you kind of review, look, question what it is that we're doing, support what we're doing, enables us then to come to when we get towards that end of funding element, saying, okay, here's a business case that says this works. And it comes back to what Claire says is, you know, if it works and it's continuing to reduce harm to our communities, then we've all got to be supportive of that and ultimately find the money. Just in relation to your question around the prevalence of ASB in deprived areas, you're absolutely right. So very much you're twice as common to be involved in some sort of ASB activity in low income areas, and certainly the Home Office research certainly confirms that people living in the most deprived areas are more likely to experience or witness ASB within a 12-month period than those that aren't. So yeah, we know where the kind of synergies are in terms of deprivation areas, but this is very much around utilising that one-off funding to evidence what works. And certainly I think we've evidenced in this first round of where we've done that targeted intervention, what we want to be able to evidence is that when we move the target evidence away, the business as usual activity and the sustainability of those activities, and if that's not working, then we need to review how that actually then operates once we go.
Sorry, can I just come back in and say, because I'm a stickler for statistics, Councillor Lee, and the work that we did when we presented the paper in 2024, so what we call the rapid review of antisocial behaviour, actually the statistics were that 21% of all ASB in the county was committed by under 18-year-olds. Actually, everything else was adult issues, which again is not necessarily people's perception. Everybody thinks it's, yeah. As I say, I can certainly get you the more up-to-date data because that's obviously quite dated now. And it does tend to follow a similar pattern year on year, though, to be honest.
Thank you. Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at your report here, Preventive Education Secondary, the first place you went to was Sleaford, I'm glad to see, which is my constituents are. We've got 3 secondary schools in Sleaford. Did you go to all 3 of them?
Yes, we did. And actually, again, the Stay Safe partnerships, and so the Community Safety County Council Stay Safe team routinely go to those Kingswhammer and such like in Sleaford. So again, you know, we have really good relationships with those schools. So with this being a universal offer, again, just to give assurance to the committee, we don't preclude any school or any children. We literally do make that universal approach to all those schools and deliver what they would like us to deliver to that cohort of pupils that we've identified. Yeah.
Did you find any big differences between the 3 schools in Sleaford?
Should probably be a bit more diplomatic than I would be in terms of I mean, across the county, I would say you see that variance. We really struggle, Stay Safe wise, getting the private schools to engage as a general rule. So our state secondary schools and primary schools are really good at engaging with our preventative education offer. It's a real bugbear of Catherine's, my Stay Safe manager. She takes it a personal mission to get all schools in Lincolnshire to engage with the offer, but it isn't always forthcoming, that engagement, I'm afraid. But in terms of your specific point.
Yeah, in terms of your question about any differences, we did see the differences between St George's and then the grammar schools. So the grammar schools' approach to who they chose to put on the course, because that is their choice and their judgment, was quite different. And what we also noticed as well is a lot of the grammar school children were potentially committing antisocial behaviour in the town and then hopping on a bus and leaving. So that made the project quite difficult from a community point of view, because the work that we were doing in the community, the people that we necessarily wanted to target had already gone home. So there was a difference in the behaviours, in what the schools expected from us, and it was not seen in the schools to work quite so well in the grammar school settings, because there was a different understanding, and I think the schools are not willing to accept always that there is an antisocial behaviour issue with any of their pupils. So it did receive lots of positives. A lot of the children showed progress, but there was a definite difference, and we took that learning as to how they shaped what they delivered in Gainsborough. So they made some slight alterations to the programmes depending on where the schools they go into, to account for those sort of difference in the learning that we made there.
Thank you. Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for this very detailed and very interesting report. I'm very curious. I mean, you're doing an awful lot of work here. But ultimately, if we want to, I'm thinking of the children's strand now, if we want the young people not to commit antisocial behaviour, we really need to create opportunity or replace the wandering around the streets with something. You know, they haven't got youth clubs. Where do they go other than wander around the streets? I mean, some of them can go to each other's homes some of the time, I suppose, but that facility isn't available to everybody. So, you know, we want them to behave in a way that we want them to behave, and we're encouraging them, and we're hoping that people will help them, parents, schools, but not all of them have access to positive societal modelling. So one wonders, what can we do to actually replace the antisocial tendency with something else? Now, just to put in a bit of an answer there, in Gainsborough, we're looking very much at the offer, the leisure offers around, West Lindsey actually, and we know that there are quite a few offers for older people and much less for teenagers. So we're hoping to address that. But then we find things like teenagers won't access the leisure centre because there are some dark nooks and crannies around the outside of the building, and it frightens them. Well, we hadn't even thought about that, but when we walked around it, yes, actually there were. And that was actually putting children off. Some of them want to go to swim but can't afford it, apparently, which is something else we can look at. So there are things that are just ordinary little day-to-day things that are keeping the children away from accessing social events and clubs, which could help to keep them off the street. And I wonder that within all this huge amount of work, what are we doing to look beyond the beyond, to look beyond and to actually leave something in place that they can use on a daily basis when we stop doing this? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brockway, I'd be interested in your constituents' observations of the Beyond project in Gainsborough. But interestingly, just to draw your attention back to the report, I think on page 62, one of the things we did as well was utilise some surveys that had been completed through our Stay Safe partnership in terms of the Keeping Safe survey, so that's directly getting the voices of young people, but then also just Lincolnshire's Safer Streets project. They'd undertaken a survey as well, which was targeted more at gaining the adult's voice. And actually, they also highlighted that activities for young people, so whether they were under 16 or over 16, when we kind of said, you know, what do you think would make a difference in terms of reducing or addressing antisocial behaviour? Again, education was a common theme that came through from both those children and adults, but also activities for young people. And we do know, as I say, through the Beyond project that, you know, the feedback that we got, and again, it was interesting that one of the it was free. I think, come back to your point in, I ought to have said, if I didn't, that actually it was free to all of those children. There was no cost. And again, one of the bits of feedback that we've got on page 64 was about how fun it was, and that a child was saying, I couldn't have done it if it wasn't free. And it's something as simple as finding a field and taking a football. You'd be amazed how much interest that generated. And that the parents, again, in terms of the feedback, were very much saying, can't say words that are good enough to describe what you're doing. What would the kids be doing instead, out on the streets or gaming? And again, keep referring back to it, but the government's intentions around the Youth Matters strategy is exactly that, is bolstering those services, interventions, resources for young people. So the youth centres, as you've mentioned, again, that's an intention that they want to bring that back to the fore. Activities, hobbies, sports activities is something that again is referenced. That money that they're looking at distributing, that's what's behind that. They want that money to go to those very things you've identified as perhaps absent in some localities, or certainly probably not as in as, you know, a greater degree as it needs to be in some locations in terms of availability or capacity. But yeah, completely agree with you that one of the things that we've looked to do, I keep coming back to Dave's Positive Futures, his core team is that looking at the learning from the Beyond project and what's been particularly successful and what might be successful in different locations as well, because again we've tried to kind of personalise it to the location we're going to, because everywhere's very different. And Dave is taking that learning to look at how that could influence and alter, and he can shape his core service to ensure that what's delivered in those localities beyond the Beyond project. And again, community services, as I say, what we're really keen to ensure we do is that we do engage with communities. So, say for example in Sleaford, the Alive Church has quite a footprint within Sleaford, and so we, you know, kind of forged a relationship with them and worked with them. And what we're trying to do is that when we step up and walk away, that they will continue and pick up the mantle and carry on some of what we see as the most effective pieces of the project. So Lincoln City Football Club, the foundation, they'd received some funding where they were delivering something around obviously sports and football in Sleaford. So again, we, as custodians of the Beyond project, we kind of left them to continue and sustain some of these interventions and activities for young people when we step away. And that's why we're keen to kind of monitor the data in terms of, and the softer intelligence as to how it feels for communities once we've gone. Because what would be disappointing is if you do as you've described, Councillor Brockway, if you do go in and invest quite a bit of time and resource and money into this initiative, but actually it all kind of unravels quite quickly when you've gone, then actually some may question the point of the investment in the first place. So sustaining it beyond the Beyond project's really important to us. We're still on a journey though, it's still actually comparatively quite early days. We're only at our third location, so I'm sure there'll be much learning to be done. I'm just going to bring in Dave in case he wants to just add a...
Yeah, just in terms of specifically about Gainsborough. One of the things we did in Gainsborough was we worked with the District Council and also the Town Council to specifically capture the voice of young people about one for the District Council was about a big funding stream they were applying for, and they wanted to capture the voice of young people to inform that funding bid, to understand where the gaps, where the very things you echoed about what is preventing young people to engage in activities, how this bid might resolve some of them challenges. Unfortunately, we were informed afterwards that the bid was unsuccessful. However, the legacy of the project in us helping them secure that information is there to help shape future services, but also is there for any future potential funding bids. And we also did the same with the Town Council as well as regards to their revamp with their skate park. and again ensuring, working with, I believe it was Amanda Clark, to enable her to come out and actually speak directly to young people who are sort of using that space or hanging about that space, to understand from their perspective what would make that more attractive, and a place that they would want to use more often. And then just in terms of sustainability, one of the things we do as well, which will continue to develop, is when we work with an organisation who has youth workers, sports coaches, we also offer them training afterwards as well. So as we exit, we'll offer them workshops around managing challenging behaviour, understanding ASB's impact on young people's participation in youth work and sports. So we'll have a range of workshops that are delivered to try and add a sustainability of skill and knowledge and upskill those that will remain after us with that knowledge to continue to engage young people in their community a little bit more effectively. Because I would say certainly in Sleaford, the providers we work with needed some skilling up. They were doing a fantastic job, but there were specific skills that they recognised they needed to engage the wider spectrum of young people within their community. So we was able to offer that support, and that's something we've learnt and are going to build in the future models as part of an exit and a transition out of one area and into another area.
Thank you. Councillor Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'll start by acknowledging the high quality of the report. It's great to see this work's going on. My area in St Giles Division, and also at the city level as well, with Abbey Ward incorporating Monks Road. I mean, we see a lot of the negative impacts of not really investing in our youth provisions as much as we'd like to, and how that can spill over into adult social care needs later on. And I think something out of this report that really resonated with me was this idea that a lot of these adults are sort of actually sort of coming into contact with us and with our other adult services at times, and often are missing appointments because of their hectic lifestyles and I suppose their needs and whatever else. So I know that the police at the North Lincoln Shop Watch, we recently had a conversation with them, and they were explaining to us how dealing with shop theft in particular, they have like a top 40 of the worst offenders in the city, and they use that list to essentially have a slightly different approach to really target those individuals. So if they get caught shoplifting, they can really zone in on them, but it's this wider approach, and they've adjusted to that. I really feel if we've got adults that are coming through who are missing appointments and having their cases closed, that's a real concern for myself, that those really, we need a more pointed wraparound care approach, I think, for those individuals, and we really need to be isolated. And I'm sure the teams have got work like that going on in the background, or at least I hope they have. On page 59, it's showing every repeat ASB victim is struggling with deep, complex mental health or addiction issues in most cases. So I suppose my question on that is do we have any kind of wraparound approach for those individuals when it's passed out to other areas? Because this is going over to the Adults Board, Safeguarding Board, is that right? And then with regards to the children's side of it, I mean, I'm sure everyone will agree that there's positive experiences, or I like to call it the opportunities for taking risk in young children, I think is probably the best way of looking at it from my view. So, you know, kids being able to take risks in a safe space is one of the greatest ways for them to develop and engage. And every pound we spend on a young child is arguably going to be close to 17 to 20 pounds saved when they become an adult. We're reducing that ongoing sort of circular, taking advantage of social value and other things. I think the concern I've got is that I'm sure when I was going through the budget stuff last week, there was a £111,000 cut to the youth offending budget. And there is also, I think, the Adult Safeguarding Board, I'm sure that had gone down to zero. That there was no, there was a substantial cut to the Adult Safeguarding Board. So if this is migrating over to the Adult Safeguarding Board for them to pick it up, I suppose it's more of a question for Martin. Is there has there been a cut to that area, and is it resourced effectively? But that's
there's not been a cut to the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Adults Board. We've asked partners for greater contributions because LCC were paying the majority of the costs for the running and the administration of that board. We've also streamlined, so some of our costs, for example, we had a chair and a deputy chair, for example, for the LSAB. We looked nationally and nobody else had that function. We thought, well, the deputy chair was turning up at the same time the chair was turning up, and we were paying for both to be there.
fair.
So it's those sorts of things that we've taken out, but we've asked for greater contributions from the ICB and Lincolnshire Police to contribute equitably to the board. Again, based on looking at nationally what's happened, whether that's a straight third split, whether it's actually more impactful on adults. And I can't remember, Claire, are we about 40%? I can't remember now. Yeah, we pay about 40, and then the others, the 60, split between the other two agencies. So yeah, so it's not. It's been a reprofiling of the funding.
That would explain that then, because again, still learning these budget lines and how they all.
Yeah, in the adults paper, it talked about the LSAB being, I think it was something like 72,000 and down to zero. That budget's actually gone into the community safety budget because it's the community safety team now that oversee the LSAB. So it's not gone. It's just moved into another budget line.
Excellent, thank you. I mean, the other side of this as well. I mean, we've had in St Giles, the YMCA have obviously opened up the new youth centre facility there, which is a great thing. And actually, I think Dave, I worked. Your name is still heralded on the St Giles estate from the old youth centre that used to be there before it was sadly burnt down. It's great to have that. I think one thing that does keep coming around whenever I meet with them is that it's really easy to get the money for the building. It's really easy to get sort of those key elements paid for. But for a long time after opening, they've been without the actual equipment that they need to really resource that place correctly, and that's a real shame. The other week I went to visit the Scouts on St Giles, and this was completely new to me. I had no idea that they were really meeting. I knew there was a Scout troop there, but I didn't recognise how amazing the work that they're doing is. They've got over 85 children going there every single Friday of all age groups coming together in that estate. Really unique opportunities for those kids to experience sort of different skills, and really to make friends outside of school as well that are actually in their local communities and things. So I suppose the worry I have is that what I have seen a lot of over the last 4 or 5 years is there's a lot of work and emphasis going into looking at what the issues around ASB are. It very rarely seems to get to that point where it becomes something, and this feels like actually it could. And I'd really like some reassurance from all of you that you all feel that is the case, and we are going down that line where actually this is going to result in something that's going to provide for our community's children to hopefully reduce the number of adults that we end up falling out of the other side of it.
Thank you, Councillor Christopher. I mean, what I would say, coming back to one of the kind of first question you asked about, are there opportunities for us to come together on addressing antisocial behaviour, particularly, I suppose, in terms of the adult world. And I think one of the acknowledgements and the recognition is that we could have just gone and delivered the operational response in terms of adults as was originally proposed to this committee, but we deliberately didn't do, because actually what we were at risk of doing is repeating what we've always done, or what other agencies have done. And in terms of traditional kind of management of antisocial behaviour, it has often been, and this isn't a criticism, it's just an observation, about stopping that immediate behaviour, often through enforcement, so dealing with the immediate antisocial behaviour, rather than perhaps taking the time to understand why is this happening. So you're looking at the symptom rather than the cause. Whereas our findings, I suppose, through the work that we did, was that the antisocial behaviour is a symptom of a much broader issue that, again, requires a multifaceted, multi-agency response, which is why we've taken it, I suppose, from... as partners, we come together through the Community Safety Partnership in terms of antisocial behaviour, terms of those Section 17 duties that we hold with the district councils and police. But we've actually said this is, certainly for the adult cohort, this is much bigger than ASB. So we need a response where we're working with mental health workers and social workers, not just police and district council colleagues, because, and that's no criticism or detriment to them, is that you know, that in some instances of some types of ASB, that kind of dealing with the immediate enforcement style response is required and successful. But actually, in terms of this cohort, we were saying we need to sit this somewhere else, which the Safeguarding Adults Board recognised very much sits with their strategy around prevention and focusing effort and energy in that prevention early action phase will bring you better results than just waiting to deal with the crisis. So I'm optimistic because it's the first time in terms of their governance of it and saying we will facilitate this because, you know, the board enables partners to come together, and obviously we'll seek assurance that as a project that it delivers what we want it to deliver as a county. So I'm very optimistic about that. I don't know whether Dave wants to come in equally with the children's bit, but I'll, yeah.
Yeah, just in terms of, just more broadly, I know there's been reference to the National Youth Strategy. I think my understanding from briefings and reading the documents that the local authority will be more of a convener of the resources and funds that come down as part of the National Youth Strategy. So what that will require of us is to work with all those partners in the areas where we need to secure delivery to ensure we realise the funding, we secure the funding and realise the impact of the funding. So that approach hopefully will mean that the Scouts, the YMCA and other organisations are part of the discussion and part of the opportunity to secure funding, to secure their ongoing delivery, and also create new and innovative projects that meet the National Youth Strategy agenda. And then just on that, which I think is worth note, in terms of the local government outcomes framework, there's been an outcome added recently which identifies the responsibility around youth service provision and how we might measure against that. So for me, that adds a little bit of emphasis and security for us as a local authority to be ensuring we are delivering adequate and comprehensive youth services to young people across Lincolnshire.
Thank you. All right, just come back briefly. Is that okay? It sort of refers back to something we discussed earlier, actually, before we changed our committee stylings or whatever else. Just with regards to the potential loss of community policing elements or the restrictions in that, I was at a meeting recently with Carlton Academy School, and they have always been big advocates for the mini police as an example. I think that's a wonderful way for children to learn who their local PCSO or local police officers are, and to get that unique opportunity to sort of experience that life. I don't know if I've shared it in here before, but there's a wonderful story from my PCSO where he actually had a young girl out on the road checking speeding cars, and they have a little script that they read if he pulls a car over to the driver, and one girl actually ended up pulling over her dad for speeding past her school. I mean, I can't imagine a more brilliant way of teaching a parent to behave on the roads and whatever else. But I mean, I have real concerns that we're actually going to end up losing these community police officers that are able to do that work. But also, with regards to the academy schools as well, we have far less control over what their budgets are spent on. And quite a lot of them, and Carlton in particular, was saying that they can't really justify the cost of that at the moment. It's not a huge amount, but it's those little things as well, where actually we've got an educational platform here, but that's only really relevant to our county schools. It's not relevant to those academies. It's a choice for them. But I know it's those little things. It's the Scouts, it's the YMCA projects that are going on in my community. It's the things that are going on within the school. Those children having those interactions with the local PCSO and having a consistent person that's always in those roles is somebody that they build trust in, and actually that trust then flows over into their adult care and they have those deep, meaningful relationships and stuff. And I can see and hear there's glimmers of all of this coming out from what work's been carried out. But does the risk of us losing community policing have any impact on this moving forward?
I mean, ultimately it will do, but certainly in that, as I say, we said earlier, we're going to have a sort of a short-term piece of pain now that they've kind of awarded a greater funding. My understanding is that 27 new PCSOs are due to be recruited as a result of the additional funding, which will then be spread around the county, so it will put us back into some form of equitability around the neighbourhoods to enable more PCSOs to be available for very much the same things that you've got. So whilst again I think there were some reductions in those numbers due to the funding costs, there's going to be a short stretch to 6 to 12 months to get the PCSOs back in, but I think they've committed to 27 recruitment within this year. I'll have to just check the number because it was put on a published paper somewhere that I read, so I'm doing it purely from memory. So yeah, there will be a short-term pain, but I think there's additional funding as well coming from Department for Education around preventative education. So very much the work that we're already doing with the Stay Safe partnership, government are actually looking to try and do that nationally and provide funding for that nationally. It's about how do we then leverage into that funding and then maybe move some of our funding element elsewhere to kind of bolster the activities and the coordination that you've described.
Thank you very much. That concludes the discussion on the item. Thank you, Anne and Claire, for your report. I'm proposing that the committee is satisfied with the contents of the report and has been ensured on the delivery of the antisocial behaviour project work undertaken by Community Safety and Positive Futures. Can we please raise hands if we agree? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. That is agreed. That concludes the business of the meeting today. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance.